Elias Grant, 72, sat slumped on a park bench in rags that reeked of dust and time. To the world, he was just another forgotten soul. But behind the grime hid a multimillionaire, a father desperate to break the walls around his son's heart. Across the square, his son, Daniel, a brilliant tech architect, handed coins to a girl with paint-stained hands and tired eyes. "He always gives, but never lets anyone in," Elias murmured. So he watched, waited, and when the girl sat beside him and shared her only sandwich, something shifted. She didn't see a beggar. She saw a man. And Elias saw a woman who just might heal his son, not with wealth, but with soul. "What's your name, child?" he asked, already plotting the impossible. The wind sliced through the park like a blade, dragging dead leaves across the pavement as Elias Grant huddled on the bench beneath his worn-out coat. He'd traded his penthouse view for this. 3 weeks of pretending to be a nobody. His hands were cracked, face streaked with soot, beard overgrown. No one recognized him, not even Daniel, who passed by every day without looking twice. But Elias wasn't watching his son today. He was watching her. She came every afternoon at 4:15 p.m. Same time, same stride, same messy bun and rolled-up sleeves. Paint speckles dotted her jeans, sometimes blue, sometimes yellow. Elias figured she was either an art student or someone too stubborn to give up painting, even when life didn't cooperate. Today she sat on the bench beside him with a long sigh and opened a brown paper bag. A crushed sandwich, half an apple, and a water bottle. She glanced sideways. "You hungry?" Elias blinked, caught off guard. "Me?" She smiled, soft but sad. No one sits that still unless they're tired or starving. He hesitated, then nodded. "Starving." Without pause, she handed him half the sandwich. "Turkey and mustard. Sorry, the bread's stale." Elias took it like it was gold. "Best thing I've eaten all week." "You must eat terrible things then." He chuckled, and for a second she looked pleased with herself. Most people looked through him. She saw him. "What's your name?" Elias asked, chewing slowly. "Clara," she said. "You?" He paused. "Eli." Not a full lie, just enough to keep the game going. "Nice to meet you, Eli." She stood and slung her backpack over one shoulder. "I have to go. Teaching an after-school class. Art, mostly. See you tomorrow." "Same bench," he said, almost surprised at himself. She smiled and walked away, unaware that her simple kindness had changed everything. The next day she returned. So did he. Day after day, Clara sat beside him, sometimes just for a moment, other times for an hour. She shared sandwiches, told stories about the unruly kids in her art class, laughed at her own bad jokes. She never asked for anything in return, never treated him like he was less than. On day 6, Elias finally asked, "Why do you talk to me, Clara?" She shrugged. "Because everyone deserves to be seen." Elias swallowed hard. Her words clung to his ribs like truth. His son had everything, wealth, success, power, but he'd built his life like a fortress. No friends, no romance, no softness, just work. Clara, on the other hand, was color in a world gone gray. "Do you know that man?" Elias asked one afternoon, nodding toward Daniel as he crossed the park. She squinted. "Him? The guy in the black coat?" "Yes. I've seen him around. Doesn't smile much." "Would you talk to him?" She snorted. "He looks like he'd report me for existing too loudly." Elias smiled. "He's not what he seems." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Neither are you." He laughed, nearly choking. "Touché." That night, Elias sat in his empty estate, stripped of disguise. He stared out the window, heart heavy. Daniel hadn't dated in years. Said no one cared about him, only what he had. Elias believed him. That's why he'd started this madness, to find someone who saw people. Someone who might see Daniel if she had the chance. And Clara? She might be the only person in years to treat Elias like a human being, not a checkbook. He had a plan now. Tomorrow, he'd set the stage. Elias was already seated on the bench when Clara arrived the next afternoon, balancing a bag of food and 2 coffees. She handed him one with a knowing grin. "I figured you'd show up early today," she said. "It's finally warm enough to not freeze our faces off." Elias chuckled. "Coffee? You spoil me." "You're my favorite fake homeless philosopher," she teased. Elias sipped, then pointed across the park. "There's that man again." Clara looked. Daniel stood in his usual tailored coat, checking his watch like he was late for something important, which he probably was. Then, as always, he dropped a few bills into the hat of the saxophone player near the fountain before heading toward the office tower. "You like watching him," Clara observed. "Maybe," Elias said. "He looks lonely." Clara gave him a side glance. "Everyone looks lonely in this city." "No, not everyone. Not you." She shrugged. "I used to be." There was a story in that sentence, but Elias didn't push. Instead, he leaned into the moment. "What if you talked to him?" Clara blinked. "Why would I do that?" "Maybe he needs someone to see him." She tilted her head. "You and your seeing people thing. What's the deal, Eli? You some retired therapist?" Elias grinned. "Let's just say I've seen what happens when people stop connecting." She took a long sip of coffee, eyes still on Daniel. "He does have a sad face. I think you could make him smile." Clara scoffed, but a faint blush colored her cheeks. "I don't even know him." "Start with hello." The next day, Elias didn't leave it to chance. He waited until Clara arrived, then stood with exaggerated effort and said, "Hold my seat, I'll be back." He crossed the park slowly, every step calculated. As Daniel approached, eyes locked on his phone, Elias tripped, spilling a sketch pad Clara had left behind. Daniel stooped to pick it up before Elias even spoke. "You okay?" Daniel asked, helping him up. "Old bones, bad knees," Elias muttered. "Thanks, son." Daniel glanced at the sketchbook, brow raised. "Yours?" "No," Elias said, brushing off his coat. "It belongs to the young woman on that bench over there, Clara." Daniel turned slightly. Clara was watching, clearly puzzled. "She's got a gift," Elias added, "and a good heart." Daniel handed back the book and nodded politely. "I'll take your word for it." "Maybe don't," Elias said. "Ask her yourself." Later that afternoon, Clara told Elias, "Your son's got a voice like dry toast." Elias nearly dropped his coffee. "You talked to him?" "He brought me the sketchbook," she said. "Tried to make small talk. Failed miserably." Elias smiled. "And?" "He's not as cold as he looks," she admitted. "Just awkward, overly polite, like a robot that read one book on human emotion and decided that was enough." Elias laughed loud and full. "You should give him another shot." Clara narrowed her eyes. "Why do you care?" He met her gaze. "Because some people need a little nudge to open their hearts, and some people like you have just enough light to make it happen." She looked away. "I'm not interested in projects, Eli. I'm not saying you fix him, just talk to him." Clara stood. "Fine. But if he turns out to be a serial killer or a Bitcoin guru, I'm blaming you." Over the next week, Clara and Daniel crossed paths more often. Elias stayed on his bench like a silent stage director. They talked about music once, then art, then books. Daniel even laughed once, an awkward, unpracticed sound that made Clara blink in surprise. Elias saw it all from afar, heart swelling. Daniel didn't know who Clara was, but he kept coming back. Clara didn't know who Daniel was, but she looked at him now. Really looked. Elias, beneath his grime and worn shoes, smiled like a man who saw spring after a long winter. One afternoon, Clara sat beside Elias, breathless. "Okay," she said. "Your mystery man? He asked me out." Elias choked on his tea. "He did?" She nodded. "Coffee. Saturday." I said yes. Elias forced composure. "You don't seem thrilled." "I am Kind of. She hesitated. But it feels weird, like I'm stepping into something bigger than I can see. Elias looked her in the eyes. Sometimes the best things start that way. She was quiet a moment, then nodded. You're really rooting for this, aren't you? Elias grinned. More than you know. The Saturday coffee date was supposed to be simple. A cozy spot near the park. 2 lattes, some nervous conversation. Nothing dramatic. But life had other plans. Daniel arrived 5 minutes early, as always, dressed down for once, no suit, just a sweater and jeans. Clara walked in exactly on time, flushed from the wind, carrying a sketch pad under her arm. She looked unsure, vulnerable. Daniel stood to greet her, awkwardly bumping the table. You look warm, he said, immediately regretting it. Clara laughed. Wow, off to a strong start. He chuckled, visibly loosening. Can I try again? Sure, she said, sitting. Reset button hit. Daniel smiled, this time more easily. I'm glad you came. They talked. Slowly at first, then with surprising ease. Art. City life. How Daniel didn't like attention. How Clara used to paint murals illegally because she couldn't afford studio time. Laughter crept in like sunlight through clouds. For a moment they weren't opposites, they were simply 2 people enjoying each other. Across the street, Elias watched from a bench in disguise, heart pounding. This could be it, he thought. They're finding each other. But then a black SUV pulled up nearby and everything unraveled. Mr. Grant, called a voice from the open door, urgent and unknowing. The board meeting's been moved to 3:30. We'll need to brief you in the car. Elias froze. Clara and Daniel both turned, and in that instant it all shattered. Clara stood slowly. Her eyes darted between the luxury vehicle, the man in rags, and Daniel, whose expression had collapsed into confusion. You, she whispered, taking a step forward. You're not a beggar. Elias opened his mouth, but no words came. Daniel rose, too. What is this? Elias removed his knit cap. Let me explain. You've been spying on me? Daniel's voice rose tight and furious. Using her to do what? Play matchmaker? It wasn't like that, Elias said. It's exactly like that, Clara snapped. Her face was red, trembling. Was this some kind of test? A joke? No, Elias said quickly. You were never part of the game. You were the answer. But she stepped back. You lied to me. You made me feel safe, like I could trust you. And you... She turned to Daniel, her voice cracking. Were you in on this? Daniel shook his head, jaw tight. I had no idea. Clara's voice dropped to a whisper. Then we're both fools? She turned and walked out, sketchpad clutched like armor. Daniel didn't follow. Neither did Elias. The SUV ride back was silent. Daniel stared out the window, fists clenched. Son, Elias finally began. Don't, Daniel cut him off. I don't even know where to start. I was trying to help. No, you were trying to control me, Daniel snapped, like always. Elias looked away. You said no one ever saw you for who you were. I wanted to give you a chance to be seen by someone who actually matters. You don't get to decide who that is. She's special. I know she is, and now I've lost her, thanks to you. Elias swallowed hard, regret settling heavy in his chest. Daniel's voice softened, but it hit harder. You used her like a pawn, like you always do, with people, with business. This wasn't about love. This was about winning. That silenced Elias, because it was true. 3 days passed. Elias sat alone on the park bench. No rags, no disguise. Just an old man with a thermos of cold tea and no visitors. Clara didn't come. Daniel didn't call. Even the pigeons kept their distance. He thought about the moment Clara handed him half a sandwich like he mattered. About how Daniel laughed for the first time in years. About what he'd broken trying to build something whole. It had started as a plan to help, but somewhere along the way, it had become about him. sighed and stood to leave. Then, just as he reached the path, a voice called out, "You forgot your thermos, Eli." He turned. Clara stood at the bench holding it out. Elias took it slowly. "Didn't think I'd see you again." "Neither did I," she said quietly. They sat in silence for a while. Finally, Elias said, "I'm sorry. For everything. For lying. For pushing. For making you part of something you never agreed to." Clara looked at him. "Why did you do it?" "Because I saw the way you looked at people, like they mattered. My son, he needed that. I thought if you saw him, the real him, you might fall for who he is, not what he owns. And you thought manipulating us would make that happen?" He winced. "I hoped love would grow if it wasn't poisoned by money. But I forgot love doesn't grow where there's no trust." She nodded slowly. "I don't forgive you. Not yet. But I believe you meant well. That's more than I deserve." They sat quietly again. Then Clara asked, "Is he okay?" "No," Elias said, "but I think he wants to be." It was a quiet Sunday morning when Clara found herself standing in front of Daniel's apartment building. Modern glass, smooth steel, and nothing warm about it. She almost turned back. Almost. But a familiar voice echoed in her memory. Some people need a little nudge to open their hearts. Elias hadn't tried to contact her again. He didn't beg, didn't bribe, didn't push. He'd simply told the truth, quietly. It lingered longer than it should have. And Daniel, well, he hadn't lied to her at all. Clara took a breath, stepped inside, and told the front desk, "Tell Daniel Grant Clara's here to return a sketchbook." She waited by the elevator, sketchpad clutched in her arms like a shield. 5 minutes later, the elevator doors opened. Daniel stepped out slowly, eyes tired, hands in his pockets. He froze when he saw her. "You came." "I did," Clara said, holding up the sketchbook. "You left this on the bench." Daniel almost smiled. "Didn't think I'd see you again." "Same." They stood in silence, the kind that asked big questions without saying a word. "I didn't know what my father was doing," Daniel finally said. "He kept things from me. Always has." "I know," Clara said. "He told me." Daniel looked down. "You were never part of the plan." "I was the plan," Clara said bluntly. "And I hate that. But you weren't fake, not to me." He met her gaze. "Neither were you." She bit her lip, then asked, "If your dad hadn't done all that, would you have ever talked to me?" Daniel hesitated. "Probably not. I don't talk to anyone. And yet here we are." "Here we are," he repeated. They took a walk, no destination, no rush. Just two people finally choosing to show up honestly. They talked again, about things that mattered, about things that hurt. Clara told him about her brother, lost in a car crash 3 years ago, how she stopped painting for months, how working with kids helped her remember color. Daniel shared stories of corporate takeovers, of empty parties, of people pretending to care just to pitch an app or flirt with his bank account. She asked if he'd ever been in love. He said, "I thought I had been, but I think I mistook safety for connection." "And now?" He looked at her and said, "Now I want connection, even if it scares me." Clara nodded slowly. "Me too." That afternoon, they ended up back at the park, walking toward Elias's bench. He was there, of course, no disguise now, just an old man in a wool coat feeding pigeons like a ritual. Clara spoke first. "We thought you might be here." Elias turned, eyes wide. He stood slowly. "Well, I'll be damned." Daniel stepped forward, hands in his coat. "We talked." "I can see that," Elias said, cautiously hopeful. "You're not yelling. That's progress." Clara smiled. "Don't get used to it." They all laughed, tentatively, but together. Then Daniel said something that startled even him. "I'm not mad anymore." Elias blinked. "You're not? You did it all wrong," Daniel said, "but for the right reasons." Elias exhaled. relief washing over him like sunlight. I still shouldn't have lied. No, Clara said. But you did see something in us we didn't see in ourselves. Daniel turned to her. And I'm glad he did. Because I would have missed you. She met his eyes. Then let's not miss each other anymore. Weeks passed. Elias gave up the bench, but not the park. He came often. No rags, no tricks. Just a quiet man content to watch two people grow into something real. Daniel and Clara didn't rush. No grand gestures, just walks, dinners, shared art supplies, open conversations, and trust, rebuilt brick by brick. Clara asked Daniel once what he remembered most from their first few talks. He said, "You didn't care who I was, and for the first time I cared who you were more than anything else." She kissed him softly. "That's what I saw in your father." Elias, watching from a bench nearby, smiled to himself. He'd spent decades building companies, funding revolutions in tech, making headlines. But this was the masterpiece.